Hi guys, it's Machaela and welcome back to my channel, and welcome to a video where I kind of share my experience being both on and off birth control for about 10 years now. Before we get into this, I do want to make a disclaimer. This video is it's my personal opinions, my personal experiences. I'm not telling you what to do or what not to do, and I'm also not your doctor, so if you do have concerns, make sure you share those with your doctor. Also, this video may contain some sensitive information. I will be getting a little bit vulnerable in this video, so just be careful, watch with some discretion. But I want to start with the first time I got on it. I got on it at 14 years old, and I got on it for the sole purpose of my body was having a hard time regulating my periods, and I needed to get on it to help regulate my periods. My periods were every 2 to 3 weeks. They were very inconsistent. They were very often, and I was never not dealing with period symptoms. So my mom and I consulted a doctor, and we decided that this was the best course of action for me for now. So I was on it from ages 14 through 19. I was not sexually active, and I was just doing it to help my body regulate itself out. And at that time, I felt like it was a very good decision. I have zero regrets about the decision. Yes, I was on the pill. I forgot which version of it I was on, but it was just, I was taking the pill, and it did more favors for me than it did not. So I was very happy with that. The first time I got off of it was age 19. Again, I was still not sexually active, and I had gotten on it because my prescription from all those years prior had expired. My mom and I had talked about it. We had decided that, let's just see what my body does. I was on it throughout my entire teen years, and we wanted to see if my body would regulate itself out, which it did, and it did so very quickly. And after that, I was able to really be able to track my periods, track my cycles. I knew exactly where I was at in my cycle, each phase of the month, based on just kind of how I was feeling. I was very in tune with my body. I still am very in tune with my body and what it does, so I know when something feels off, and it felt very good to just let my body do what it naturally did, because I just hadn't felt that since before I started having periods. So it was a very good thing. I was very excited to be off of it. So I was off of all forms of birth control from ages 15 to 22. At 22, between that time, I got married and I had my first child, and we weren't actively preventing pregnancy. As soon as we got married, we just decided that we were just going to pretty much see what would happen and see what God was going to do with that. And we conceived our first child very quickly. But after I had gotten off, or after I had my first child, I got back on the pill because that's what I was used to. That's what I was knowing. We wanted to wait a little bit of time before having more kids. So I thought, okay, I've done this before, I can do it again. And that's the first time where I started to notice a real change between being off of the pill versus being on it, and especially now being married and having been in tune with my cycle. And when I got on it again, I remember just feeling off. Like, when I was off of it for about 5 years or so, I felt really good. I felt like myself. And then when I got on it, after having been off of it for a long period of time, it just didn't feel right. It didn't feel like myself. And I just kind of felt like meh. And my moods weren't lining up with my cycle. And I just didn't like that. Like, I can very tell which week of my cycle I'm on because of my moods. And I just felt kind of like meh. Like, I didn't feel bad. I didn't feel good. I just kind of felt neutral, and it just wasn't my favorite feeling in the world. So that's the first time I kind of noticed any of that. And then so 18 months later, we decided that we wanted to start actively trying again. So I got off the pill. We got pregnant pretty quickly. It took a couple months for my body to kind of figure itself out again, as we were actively trying for baby number 2. And we got pregnant within like 2 to 3 months after. I don't quite know where the tracking was, so I can't quite figure out the exact timeline, but it was within 3 months after being off the pill, and during that time I felt good. And then I went through a second pregnancy, which was great. And then, so I went through that pregnancy. Naturally, we said, okay, let's just get on the pill again. It's what I'm used to. We were at a place where we thought we were done having kids. Keyword thought. But I actually, that time around, I was not very consistent with taking the pill, and I was always real consistent before, but I think there was just a lot happening at the time. And just the pill was, remembering to take that pill was the last thing in my mind. And so I had gotten off of it for a set period of time. I'm like, I was too sporadic with it. My body needed to regulate itself. So I thought, okay, I'm going to get off of it for about 3 months and see, just regulate my cycle out. And then I'm going to get back on it. And I'm going to remember to take the pill. And I'm going to do all the extra steps to remember to take the pill. And well, I was getting ready to get back on it. And then we found out we were pregnant with our surprise baby. Total blessing, totally excited. It was the best surprise we could have asked for, but we had, we were surprised. We're like, okay, awesome. Let's go through this again. And that's when after that pregnancy was up, that's when we started to get the IUD. So we thought we were done after baby number 2. Well, number 3 came, and we thought we were done after baby number 3, and then we thought, okay, well, I don't want to do anything permanent because I just don't want to make a permanent decision when we really, we could change our minds, and we just didn't want to do anything like that. So I thought, okay, let's get the IUD. Let's not have to remember to take a pill. And I got it. I had it in for 9 months, and I absolutely hated it. I hated what it did to my hormones. I hated what it did to me. I was just I was borderline mean, and I did not like it. I did not like the feeling of it. And my husband noticed a huge shift in my moods, and it really, they say it's low hormonal. It's not. It really, again, every woman has their experiences. I'm just speaking out of mine. And getting it inserted wasn't bad. It felt like a mid-labor contraction. If you've ever been through labor, think about a contraction where it's not exactly painless, but you're not ready to go to the hospital yet. So one of those kinds of contractions is what it felt like. Then I bled real heavily for about a month. And then I would spot around the time I supposedly got my period. It wasn't consistent. I never knew when I would bleed. When I would bleed, I'd bleed sporadically. I'd bleed a lot. Sometimes I'd bleed a little, and there was just no consistency with it. And I never felt like I was off my period. And that's when the conversation started arising. Is birth control a good thing or a bad thing? Is birth control biblical or is it not? And I feel like each of us have a different viewpoint on it, and I will get to that part in a little bit. And so we were talking about it, and ultimately my husband and I came to the conclusion of, let's just try getting off of birth control altogether and try natural family planning. We still want to family plan, we just wanted to do it the way that God created our bodies to do it. And I believe that God did give us a way to naturally family plan. It takes some self-control. So I got off of the IUD, and I immediately felt a change in my moods. I felt normal. I was able to get back in tune with my body. I felt really, really good after. So natural family planning at this point feels like the best decision for us. Going forward, I feel like we will be able to continue to do that. Being pregnant right now, we clearly, we're in this phase right now, and we are super happy. This baby was planned. However, this baby was technically planned for a little bit later in the year, but that's not a big deal to us. One thing we did know going into natural family planning was the event of we could possibly get pregnant, which we did. I feel like going forward, though, actively preventing is a very real thing we could do. We were successful at it for a time. We just looked at the calendar, didn't check our dates right, and so that is one thing I will say when natural family planning you really got to stay on top of it. It does take a lot of self-control, but I feel like it's worth it. I feel like God created our bodies to do this thing, and I felt like he created our bodies in such a way to be able to track our cycles and to prevent pregnancy. And I feel like if he didn't allow that science to have been there, he wouldn't have created it to be such an easy thing for us as people to track. So I think that family planning is actually a very good thing. I feel like natural family planning, though, is the way that God designed it. But keeping in mind, he did give us the mind to create things like birth control, though there's a lot of controversy as to whether or not it is biblical and whether or not it is considered an abortification. I also feel like there's a lot that kind of goes into that science. That is research that is beyond me. I don't really know. I've heard both sides of it, where it comes from. Is this biblical or is this trying to create abortion? Personally, I don't have a viewpoint on whether or not birth control is right or wrong. I merely have my experience, and having been on and off of it, I would highly recommend going off of it and natural family planning. That is the decision that we have made. That is the decision we plan to make going forward. And I would rather see somebody be on birth control than knowingly get an abortion. At the very least, that takes that knowledge off of that person, even if it is truly an abortification. Again, I don't have a personal preference as to where I stand on that. I see both sides just as equally, and I see it being both sides. So that's a decision I feel like you really have to make. That is between you and your spouse. And I say your spouse because having more kids it's a decision that affects both of you, and it's not a decision that is to be taken lightly. There is somebody mowing their lawn, so that's the background noise. It's a very heavy decision to make. And again, I understand birth control. I understand the reasons behind it. I also understand the reasons not to be on it. And I think ultimately, when it comes to natural family planning, and the harsh reality, unfortunately, is if you are not mature enough to have children, you are not mature enough to have sex. And that's just kind of where my husband and I have chosen to draw that line. We know going forward that there is a possibility of us having more children, even when we're thinking we're done. But we're also at a place in our lives where we know that if we do have more kids than we plan, then we're in a very sound place to be able to do so. And we know that God's going to take care of us, that God's going to take care of our family no matter what, and we are blessed with each child that he chooses to give us. And I feel like there are a few reasons for birth control. I feel like, if your cycle is irregular, I feel like that can affect more things than I think we realize. I think you should be on birth control if you do have irregular cycles, or if there are other health-related concerns. Again, when I was on birth control for the first time, I don't regret it. From my experience, if I were to ever go back on birth control, I would choose the pill, because it's not something that I have to rely on a doctor to insert or remove. I feel like it is something that, yes, I need to get a prescription for, but that's a whole lot easier to get it and then choose to get off of it than having to actually go in and get it done. And plus, I've heard all the horror stories of them getting stuck. I've heard a lot of stories I've heard some positive stories too, I really have, but I've also heard stories where it's just kind of a scary situation. And I guess if you were to go to the IUD route, and when my husband and I did decide to go the IUD route, we went in knowing that if this is all the children we had, then we would be fine if something were to go wrong with the IUD. Otherwise, personally, I would say if you do want to use the birth control method, you should use, I would recommend the pill, because it's as easy as on and off, and it's just, I feel like it's less invasive hormonally. But again, you need to make the decision for yourself. You need to do the research, to do the informed. I'm merely here to share my personal experiences. And again, with the natural family cycles, I don't know if this part got cut out or not. I kind of got a little lost there. My battery died, so I had to switch it out. But natural family planning, my husband being able to track my cycles off of his phone, he got really good at knowing when I was on my period and knowing when to buy me candy. And like about a week before he bought me chocolate, he bought me extra snacks, junk food. Like, he knew that I get really hungry right before, and he just kind of got into the habit of adding the preventative measures for me. And that is something I will say about my husband, is when we made this decision together, he made the decision to support me. He made the decision to be able to help me out when I'm on my period. He made the decision to help me out when I'm going through pregnancy, because he knows that, you know, it does take a toll on your body. And being pregnant, I'm so blessed. I love pregnancy. Pregnancy is probably my favorite thing to go through, but it's hard. It's really, really hard. And it does take a toll, and I know the more kids that you have, the more it takes a toll on your body, and I am feeling that now that we are on our 4th pregnancy. But my husband has been super supportive of it, and super supportive of just the life inside me. And again, I feel like this is a decision that is not to be taken lightly. We did not take lightly the decisions when I got on birth control, and we also did not take lightly the decisions when I got off birth control. It was a decision that was thought out and prayed about for months before any of it happened. And I also feel like if God wants you to have more kids, it doesn't matter whether you're on birth control or you're on birth control. He's going to allow you to have more kids, or have kids, if you haven't had any yet, with or without birth control. He doesn't need that. He also doesn't need to prevent pregnancy being off of birth control. God's got a plan for each of our lives. And I feel like at the end of the day, it doesn't matter whether birth control plays a role or not. God's going to do what God's going to do. We are here to merely make the best informed decisions we can, with knowing our bodies, with doing the research, with having our own personal convictions and whatnot. And again, it's a decision that is for each woman and each spouse and each husband to be able to make for themselves, and even each individual and each couple to make together, because it is a decision that doesn't just affect us as individuals, but it affects our whole family, and it affects the future children that we may or may not have, or that potential. So I think one of the biggest decisions that we can make as to whether or not we do want to prevent pregnancy, or whether or not we want to have children, because it affects so much of our lives, that it affects essentially our entire lives. So I hope this video was helpful. If you have any questions about my personal experience, feel free to message me on my Instagram. I will leave that handle link down below. If you are new here, I do videos focusing on beauty and lifestyle, and my goal on this platform is to share my love for beauty, as well as my love for Jesus Christ as my Lord and Savior. He's the reason why I'm here, and being able to share this side of things from my perspective as a follower of Christ. I hope that who He is in my life and who He is to me. And again, feel free to message me with any questions you may have. And I will see you in the next one. Bye, guys.